Home Affairs Minister Peter Dutton is demanding tech companies dramatically improve built-in security measures in their home connectivity devices. There are fears products like Google Home and Amazon Echo can be used by cyber criminals to pry into people's private affairs. At a summit in Melbourne today, Mr Dutton will unveil a draft code of practice similar to one already in place in the UK. And he joins me now from Melbourne. Welcome to you, Peter Dutton. Now, you've sounded the alarm on what we call smart devices and them being vulnerable to hacking. What benefits would such criminals reap?
Good morning, Laura. Morning, Pete. Look, Laura, I just think we've got to think about the way in which our lives operate now, all the devices at home, but think about what it is just within a couple of years. We're talking about autonomous vehicles, we're talking about remote monitoring of medical devices, obviously already a reality, all of the devices in your own home, which include watches, which include speaker systems, which include fridges, and already we've got people who are going around trying to hack into Wi-Fi systems, and if people don't have proper password protection, the criminals can get onto those systems. You can have identity theft, or people can use that internet server to log into accounts, conduct other criminal activities on somebody else's account. So it's a voluntary code of practice that we're talking about. We put it out for exposure now, and we want to make sure that the companies in the design of these things is actually thinking very seriously about ways in which they can provide protection, because when you think by 2025 there'll be about 64 billion devices around the world that we're talking about in the Internet of Things. This is a big issue.
Yeah, it certainly is, and technology does pose a lot of security risk. Note the Police Commissioner in New South Wales today has also sounded the alarm on dating apps, saying, you know, these dating apps are being used by rapists to exploit vulnerable women. And I know that you, almost a personal cause for you, is clamping down on pedophiles and how they operate. I've seen previous reports about some criminals using these apps to, you know, identify vulnerable women with children. I mean, it's just sickening stuff. Is this on your radar?
Yes, it is, and I want to commend Mick Fuller for the work that he's commissioned here, because, look, online dating apps or any online meeting place is no different than a bar or going to a restaurant or to a workplace somewhere else in the community. These predators lurk in dark spaces, and we need to expose them. People have a right, women in particular and children in particular have a right to live their life freely, not to be harassed by these people of such poor character. And already we've seen over the course of the last 12 months a dramatic increase in the number of complaints to the Australian Federal Police, for example, where people are trying to elicit body image photos from young girls, which end up making their way elsewhere onto the internet. So we've got to be very realistic about this threat, and all of us with teenage kids or with grandchildren need to worry about what it is they're facing online, predators online that are assuming identities, and we want the same rules that apply in our lifestyle offline to apply online, and I think that's a reasonable proposition to put. So getting these companies to think more cleverly about the way in which they design these products, making sure that the dating app companies have a special responsibility as well to look for predatory behaviour. We need to deal with all of that, because people are vulnerable and people are being sexually attacked, as Mick Fuller pointed out, on a regular basis, because these predators lurk in all parts of our society.
Next week, when Parliament resumes, no doubt you will have a bit of a focus on Medevac. We've seen reports just over the weekend that suggestions that perhaps Medevac laws are being exploited. There was one case, a transfer being made for a botched penis enlargement. Is that an example of these laws being exploited?
Look, I read the case on the weekend. When you're talking about the prospect of $100,000 for an operation, when you talk about the fact that once somebody has received medical attention under the Medevac laws, they can't even be sent back.
This didn't come across your desk, Minister?
Yes, it does, but under the law that Labor passed, I can't stop people coming under these circumstances, and we've now got 6 people of significant security concern that we are worried about that have come to Australia under the Medevac laws, and there are many more applications that are before us at the moment.
But at any stage, did you try to refuse this transfer?
Well, I have no grounds legally to refuse it. There are some cases where we've gone back to the panel and said, we need you to reconsider this. In some cases they have done exactly that, but in the majority of cases they've approved the original recommendation. And
how many have you asked to be reconsidered, and was this one of them?
I haven't got the exact number before me, but there are a number of cases where I've written back to the panel where I think I've got grounds. The advice that I had in relation to this case is that there were no grounds for me to reject it or to ask for it to be rejected. We pointed all of this out at the time that Labor passed this law. It's exactly the reason we're trying to repeal this law right before the Senate at the moment. So we've already passed the bill to repeal Labor's Medevac laws through the lower house, and it's stuck in the Senate at the moment. So we need the support of independents. I wouldn't need the independents if Labor decided to support us in repealing the law, because we're bringing people here who are of bad character, who frankly shouldn't be coming to our country. Well,
was this individual of bad character, or he just did some pretty heinous things to himself?
Well, obviously, and the Australian taxpayer, it looks like, will be the bunny that picks up the bill here. And I just don't think people who are pensioners waiting for operations on waiting lists now at public hospitals around the country would accept that this is a good expense of taxpayers' money. We had arrangements in place that if people needed medical attention, they could get it at the International Hospital in PNG, or they could go to Taiwan. We had arrangements already in place where people, if they needed the medical attention, could get it. But this bill was always about just bringing people here from Manus and Nauru, and Labor Party's been quite open about that.
Barres Buchani is in New Zealand. He hasn't ruled out seeking asylum there. Would you have any concerns about that?
Well, that's an issue for New Zealand, and I note the comments of the New Zealand Prime Minister yesterday that she didn't know about this individual coming into New Zealand, so that's an issue for her and for the Immigration Minister, and not something I want to comment on.
But if he did seek asylum in New Zealand, it was granted, would there be a loophole in which he could come to Australia?
He wouldn't be permitted to come to Australia. We've been very clear about that.
OK, the question was asked yesterday by Christopher Pyne to Malcolm Turnbull. Could he have won the 2019 election if you didn't see it, Peter Dutton? His answer was, oh yeah, there's not many people that would doubt it. What do you think?
Look, Laura, I just think it's ancient history now, and I think people have moved on. If I get stopped in the streets or at airports or at shopping centres around the country, the common refrain to me is, thank God Scott Morrison was elected Prime Minister of this country and Bill Shorten wasn't successful. And I think, frankly, we saved the country from Bill Shorten. That is a great outcome because people are worried about their finances, they're worried about their kids getting jobs, and they know they've got greater prospects of a stronger budget, stronger economy, and a greater prospect of their kids and grandkids getting jobs under a Morrison government. So I think the rest of it is well and truly in the past.
Well, he referred to you as the other guy. It seems like that's about the status of your relationship at the moment.
I've been referred to as worse than that, Laura, I might say.
A miserable ghost, perhaps?
I've never been referred to as that, no.
OK. Perhaps that's what you might be calling Malcolm Turnbull behind the scenes, or...?
Laura, look, let me be upfront. I supported Malcolm Turnbull very strongly, and Matthias Cormann and others in the leadership group did all we could to keep Malcolm's leadership alive, to keep the government running. But I think all of that now is well and truly in the past. I think people are, particularly, as I say, people who are near retirement, who are in retirement, people running small businesses, people worried about their kids getting a job. I think there's just a sense of relief that Scott Morrison's the Prime Minister and not Bill Shorten, and I think because of that we can now look positively to the future. OK, the other guy to some, Home Affairs Minister Peter Dutton to us here at Sky News and many others. Thank you for your time. Thanks, Laura. Thanks, Pete.